Today I'm going to talk about some work that we've been doing with Len Hunt, who's actually a research scientist with our forestry section. And we've been very lucky to lure him over to the slimy side, I guess. He's human dimensions analysis person, so he does a lot of surveys. Dave Gonder in our office has been the lead with him working on this. So we wanted to get some input from our public on the Lake Trout plan that we are revising. So my talk is going to talk a bit about why we did this initially, our sampling methods, how we did our survey, comparison of perspectives from some of the different groups that we deal with. I'll talk about some of the characteristics and differences between those groups, and then we'll have some conclusions. So we had worked with Len in the past already once, back in 2008. We did a more broad-ranging survey, and it provided some interesting results. There was a technical report that came out, and then it was also published in the primary literature. So we did find through that there was some differences between what we call our convenience sample, and our convenience sample are the people that we deal with on a regular basis, mainly our volunteer fish club people, that many of them who raise and stock fish, and the commercial fishermen and other people we deal with on a regular basis. So we knew that we wanted to try and get input back on the Lake Trout plan from a broader audience than just this convenience sample. So just to give you an overview, we did revise our plan. We did a plan back in 1996 for Lake Trout, and we wanted to revise it. We learned a lot over that time, and we also wanted to consult on that. There was an obligation because a plan is deemed policy under our government, and it has to be posted on our environmental registry, and so we have to consult on it as well. And as I mentioned, we had these past insights that just going back to our usual suspects of our convenience sample was not always going to give us what we wanted. So we did have the original plan. We assessed all the data that we had collected in the meantime, and we developed a new draft plan that we took to the public. As well, we had some of the international documents that were helping guide our work too, some of the stuff that was developed through the technical committee. So our convenience sample was the group, as I mentioned, that we deal with on a regular basis, and we provided them an opportunity to fill in a questionnaire, a little bit more involved questionnaire than our random sample that I'll get to in a second. But so they could go online and fill it in, or they could request a hard copy being mailed to them. So there's 64 people that responded through that. Kind of underwhelming. We assumed there would be a lot more because many of these clubs have many more than 64 members in their club alone. So that was a little surprising. The other part of it was we did a random sample. We went to the Sportfish License database, and we randomly selected 750 anglers that lived in the area around Lake Huron. We've determined that from the postal codes. And we sent them out a survey, a little bit more simpler survey, as I mentioned. And we contacted them a couple of times to try and twist their arms to fill these things in and get them back. So we were able to get about 47% back from them. So as I mentioned, they were a bit tailored because you can imagine the survey is going to show up in somebody's mailbox, and some of them may or may not have a lot of information background on Lake Huron, so we had to make it somewhat simpler than the one that we knew was targeting our convenience sample that had a lot more information and background on Lake Huron. So what did we want to try and get from this? Well, we wanted to try and get the importance of Lake Trout to these people, and if they thought it was important to Lake Huron itself. We wanted to determine whether they supported the draft plan, some of the specifics in the plan, like our specific rehabilitation zones, some of the regulations, and we wanted to get any concerns they had as far as rehabilitation in general, and and whether it would affect some of their species, or would detrimentally affect other species or some of their fishing activities. And we wanted to get their preferences for specifics, or management strategies, as well as I mentioned, these rehabilitation zones. As well, we wanted to learn something about them as far as their fishing patterns and their interests or knowledge and interests and previous involvement with fisheries management on Lake Huron. So this is now I'm going to go into some of the results. So this is actually the cover of the short questionnaire that we mailed out to them. So the first question here we have is the importance of lake trout to self. So this means the importance to you as an individual. Is it important to you? So we can see that it's broken down by the convenience sample. The random sample down here has the sample sizes because not everybody necessarily answered all the questions. So this is the convenience sample, 60 and responded to this question, the random sample, and then the probability that the samples didn't come from the same, whether they're from different, probability they were from different groups. So you can see in this question there was a very high amount of people that said the lake trout were very important to them as an individual. We had a split, although the convenience sample was still highest in the very important. We did have a number that said it was not important at all or not important to them. So there does seem to be this dichotomy in the convenience sample, yet it's the random sample seems to be telling a slightly different story, which we kind of thought was going to happen from our previous survey that I mentioned. Now this is a slightly different question. The last one was, are lake trout important to you as an individual? This question was, do you think that lake trout are important to the health of Lake Huron? So we got a slightly different result from that. We certainly didn't get as many not at all important or not important in the convenience sample that we did in the previous question. So I guess some of these people felt even though lake trout may not be important to them, I guess they probably had to admit that maybe they are important to the lake as a whole. So this next question is the preferred management approach for lake trout in Lake Huron. So manage for sustainability on the bottom there. Restoration is not a priority. Manage for harvest opportunities or other. So you can see that for the random group, certainly the highest proportion wanted us to manage for sustainability, and it was a real split there between the convenience sample as far as managing for sustainability or restoration was not important to them. So again, this seems to be this real split down the middle between the convenience sample. The next question was about our overall goal, which I just added there, to reestablish self-sustaining lake trout populations, thus allowing them to contribute to a healthy ecosystem. So one of these motherhood statements, and we just wanted to get their input on that. And again, it was this similar pattern where we had this strongly opposed group in the convenience sample, but it's almost even to those that strongly support in the convenience sample. And the random sample were pretty highly skewed to the right, where they were supporting our overall goal, motherhood statement. So the next was about supporting the use of lake trout rehabilitation zones. We have set up a number of areas around the lake where we think we have a high probability of being successful due to historic spawning shoal areas. And again, we have this pretty even split across here for the convenience sample, but skewed to the random sample in supporting or strongly supporting the use of these rehabilitation zones. So we asked their thoughts about what they think may be preventing successful rehabilitation of lake trout. And it was a bit all over the map, but sea lamprey, commercial fishing, subsistence fishing, sport fishing, and lack of public support. So certainly the random sample seemed to think that subsistence fishing and sport fishing were more of a factor than sea lamprey and also, I mean, sorry, they ranked these higher than the convenience sample. As I mentioned earlier, there were some differences in the questionnaires themselves between the two groups, and we didn't have this question in the random sample about lacking public support. But again, this seems to be those faction of the convenience sample that were really anti-lake trout, and it was showing up there. So the differences between the two groups. So we asked them some questions about their knowledge of the draft plan. We wanted to try and understand, you know, if they knew about it before. And it's not hugely surprising that a lot of the random people had no knowledge of it, because as I mentioned, this questionnaire arrived unannounced on their doorstep one day. But surprisingly enough, there were some that said they did have complete knowledge or good knowledge of it, a low number. And not surprisingly, our convenience sample, more of them did have a pretty good knowledge of the plan. As far as what they represented, you know, who these people were, they were able to put down multiple answers for this one. So a number of them were fishers in Lake Huron. It was a pretty good split, but concerned citizen was obviously the most common one, with purchaser of fish and cottager, etc. So it was just an attempt to figure out who these people were. And we also asked them about their fishing area where they do fish. And there was a bit of a difference here. Many of the convenience sample oriented more towards the main basin than the random sample. The random sample was split up in many different areas of the lake. And again, maybe that's not surprising, because we did randomize the postal code selection. So quite likely we got a much more random sample than we do for the convenience, because a lot of those convenience sample people are people we deal with in southern Ontario. And as far as species preference, there was certainly a big proportion of our convenience sample that do target right towards Chinook salmon and rainbow trout, as opposed to the random sample that were much more varied and do look for other species or desire other species, cooler and warmer water species. So we did seem to be targeting a bit of a different audience. And we also wanted to know about their participation in fisheries management on Lake Huron. So we asked them if they'd attended a public meeting before, had written to M&R or served on a committee. And not surprisingly, the random sample were very low in this number, and the convenience sample were much higher. So our conclusions. The random sample, there was obviously a much more, let me grab my notes here. Somewhere in here. So certainly for the convenience sampler, there was a much higher bias for, or much higher orientation rather, for salmon and rainbow trout. And they did really focus more on both Western Georgian Bay and the main basin. And they were involved as some of the decision makers, so they certainly had been in touch with us much more than the other people. So we have to wrestle with the fact that they are more educated, so should their input and desires be weighted more than our random sample. So just to finish off here, so we know that that they had a bit more knowledge. They were fishing in different areas, and there were the differences in the involvement, as I already mentioned. So that's basically it. I'll wrap up there. There were a number of other people involved in this as well, and on the list there. So I think I'll wrap it up there and take any questions.